Truck drivers of Reddit, while traveling through the night, what is the creepiest thing you've ever seen? NSW. My grandfather was a truck driver at a lumber yard for about 25 years after World War II. He once told a story about how he and a co-worker both left at the same time from the yard. My grandfather would often go first and the others would follow, but the other guy insisted on taking the lead. So they are driving on the highway, full speed. His co-worker gets cut off by a car that just switched lanes without looking. He slams on the brakes. My grandfather noted this and, being so close behind, tapped the brakes and was able to do an emergency slide into the left lane without slamming into anyone. The car was rear-ended by the truck. My grandfather pulled over and came running back only to find that the contents of the load, tons of lumber, shifted forward during the hard brake and destroyed the cab, decapitating his friend in the process. While my grandfather was no stranger to such sights in the war, especially as someone who fought on islands in the Pacific, he said this was especially tough on him, since when you're in war you prepare yourself for this kind of thing. You don't expect something so gruesome in civilian life. Trucker here. Creepiest thing would have to be wind. Driving down the road and you can't hear it and I couldn't feel it in my truck. However, the truck in front of me seemed to lift up and just flip on its side. It seemed like it was out of nowhere. I guess isn't that creepy? But when you're following and the truck in front of you seems to float up and onto its side, it is a little concerning. I've swerved around a handful of suicidal people at night. One time it was a man in a suit, was holding a briefcase too. Just casually slowed down and went around him, got on the CB and warned the other drivers. The most scared I have ever been was going over Donner Pass one night in late April. I had checked the weather reports and the only concern was supposed to be light snow flurries at the highest elevations. CA will issue mandatory restrictions indicating you have to put chains on your tires, so I checked the CA website and no restrictions were called for. I went through the inspection station at Truckee and they were asking if we had chains on the truck but still no call to put them on. About 10 miles up the road, the sky opened up into the worst whiteout blizzard I have ever been in. I could barely see 50 feet in front of me, and there had been another truck ahead of me but I lost sight of his lights completely. I could see his tracks in the snow. I slowed down to about 20 miles per hour. Then just to make it worse, the wind was blowing and the snow was swirling in all directions and I began to experience a strange vertigo, like I was flying and tumbling in the air. I had to glue my line of sight on those tracks in front of me and hope that guy did not drive off the road. I made it. It only lasted about 30 miles and it turned to heavy rain. I told my dispatcher if I ever had to go through there again at night and any snow was forecast, I was going to shut down until daylight. I had a 4-year stint of driving 18-wheelers in between my Navy and Army time. Creepiest, dead bodies in a wrecked car in Detroit. Cops were already there. Scariest, a motorcycle in a high-speed chase going the wrong way on the highway headed right towards me. Good thing my direction of travel was a 2-lane highway and the motorcycle and the 5 cop cars decided to drive past me in the lane I was not in. Not me but my father. A guy was walking down the highway in the middle of nowhere wearing all black while it was pouring rain. He was found mangled sometime after the sun came up. Many trucks go through this section throughout the night. The guy got hit by a truck at some point and my dad is positive that he would have been one of the trucks to run him over after the initial hit and kill. He just said that the weather was so bad that night and there's so many bumps in the road or kangaroos to hit that you just start to ignore the weird noises and keep driving. Not so much creepy as pants crappingly startling. It was like 2:30 am-ish. Middle of fricking nowhere Arizona. Hadn't seen another vehicle for at least an hour. Kinda dangerous territory because that is when tiredness comes creeping in no matter how well rested you are. That lack of stimulation will make you sleepy a lot easier than you might think. All of a sudden out of apparently nowhere, what seems like 100 tumbleweeds come rolling into the middle of the highway, including a couple that seemed to be the size of a large SUV. Freaked me the frick out. I went out with my uncle a few times on night runs. He'd play coast to coast and talk about seeing crap. But honestly, the most fricked up thing that ever happened to him was hitting a guy. Interstate. All lanes full. He couldn't avoid what he assumed was a jumper off an overpass that landed just in front of the truck on the road. He hit him and slowed down as much as he could with a full load. Described it like hitting a downed deer. Bump bump. Found out later the guy had been dragged up the overpass and pushed off, hit by lots of cars that couldn't avoid him. I think that it was a murder that bothered him more than hitting someone ending their own life. He also saw lights around air bases but didn't recognize the planes and has theories. So I'm on I-85 coming north out of Atlanta just above downtown just before the Peachtree Street Bridge. It's late at night and pouring rain. There are flashing lights up ahead and traffic is heavy but it's moving. I come up on a single car accident. Tons of police and emergency vehicles. Just then a cop points to me and stops all traffic in all lanes and I am on the front row. There is a car sitting sideways in the center lane and has already been attached to a wrecker but not lifted. All the emergency personnel are staring at the car. There is a police photographer taking flash pictures, so you can't see why this is a big deal. And you can only see anything as the flash goes off on his camera. As the wrecker driver begins to lift the car, the photographer flashes away. As the car rises, something large begins to slide off the front driver's side wheel out of the wheel well. I am staring too, trying to see what he is photographing. Then flash. A woman's bloody body flops onto the wet asphalt. Then darkness and flash, there she is again. It was horrific. Her clothes were shredded and she was covered in blood and road grime. Flash. Darkness. Flash. Darkness. Could not have been more freaky if it had been scripted for a movie. To this day, I don't know where she came from. Pedestrian? Jumper? Passenger? No one deserves to go out like that. In 12 years I really haven't seen much that I'd call creepy. I've been tired enough where shadows would look like an animal running out in the road. I've driven by people walking and then not see them in my mirrors. Sometimes the creepiest ones are the ones that give you the open-mouthed stare the whole time you're driving by. Not a truck driver, but friends with one. His answer is always a clan gathering that he woke up to while somewhere in OK. He never traveled alone. This time his wife was with him. He is Mexican. His wife is black. Needless to say, once they noticed they were burning a cross, they just hunkered down and waited until dawn. Obligatory, my brother-in-law, not me, but about 2 weeks ago he passed a car pulled over and parked all kinds of janky in the mountains and started to slow down just to be cautious. Just as he was coming up on a huge cliff on the right, his headlights lit up a dude dragging a screaming woman by the hair on the side of the road. The dude looked him dead in the eyes, pulled the girl up, then pushed her hard into the path of his truck, then took off heading back towards the strangely parked car. He had already slowed considerably since he saw the car, so he slammed on his brakes and stopped just in time 5 feet in front of the woman laying in the middle of the road, then jumped out to check on her. She kept saying she didn't know the guy and I just asked him for a ride after and wouldn't elaborate as to what after was referring to, so we're assuming stripper. She wanted my bill to just give her a ride, but he said that's a terrible idea and called the cops and waited with her. Pretty crazy, but the cool thing is his boss gave him a pass on being like 2 hours late for deliveries, which was cool. I was so tired once. When I first started driving and stupidly pushed things too far, I saw a large boat on a trailer driving beside me without being pulled by anything. Just literally a boat driving next to me. Somehow I couldn't register the truck pulling it. Add that to the giant tree that was growing suddenly in the middle of the highway just ahead of me, and it was way past my bedtime. I never pushed sleep deprivation that far again. My uncle from Guatemala drives trucks across the country, and his stories still make me crap my pants. By far the scariest one is when he said he was taking a nap on top the bed of the truck, when he looks over and sees a very elderly woman. He described her as having very long nails, long white stringy hair, and extremely hunched over. He was in the middle of nowhere, but he could see her entering into a small cave with a candle in her hand. He noped the frick out of there. That's some real third world witchcraft crap you won't see in the States. Dude, that's a quest giver. She probably had some A1 loot if he did what she wanted. I'm not a trucker, but once when I was driving from Texas to California, in the middle of nowhere, up ahead I saw flames. As I got closer, there was a car in the middle of the road on fire. Normally this wouldn't be very creepy, except for the fact that I was in the middle of the desert and had been driving for hours through it. There was no one and nothing around for miles and miles. I was in the middle of a wasteland. I got out of course to check and see if someone was in the car. No dice. Then I thought I heard something in the trunk. a couple of banging sounds. Of course it could have been something in the trunk maybe exploding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe someone was in it. The fire was way too hot for me to get in there and try to open it. Whipped out my phone to try to call 911. Had no signal. At that point it occurred to me that I may have just stumbled across a murder, that the person who did this might be watching, so I got the frick out of there. As soon as I had a signal I called the police and told them everything that I saw. A few hours later they called me back to confirm the area that I was in. They didn't find crap, so yeah. Not a trucker, but I was a freight broker and a dispatcher for a while. I used to work second shift and would field calls after hours. One driver called me once at night worried he was being followed. He was hauling alcohol and was worried that he would be robbed. I stayed on the phone with him while we worked out where he was. The car would randomly speed up and go around him, then stop on the shoulder and wait for him to pass and follow him for 30 minutes and do it again. Well, the driver almost ran out of hours and pulled over to the next truck stop. When he pulled in we stayed on the phone with him while he got his spot. The car stopped in front of his truck in the truck parking lot and stayed there. We were able to get a local sheriff's department to go to the lot. It took them 4 hours. The driver locked his truck up and secured the doors and a ratchet strap and covered the front window up and went to bed. When I came back to work the next day I was told the sheriff showed up and the car was still there, but it was left abandoned. There is footage of the occupant going to the gas station and then walking down the highway. I wasn't with the driver, but I'm still freaked out. So right now, I'm working nights for a job that requires me to drive around my town without stopping for hours and hours and hours. There are some weird things that happen around the time I work, from 11:30 PM to 8:30 AM. First, I was in residential neighborhood and came to a stop at a 4-way stop sign. I glance over and there is a man in nothing but tighty whities, a children's size bicycle helmet, and roller skates. So I drove away pretty quickly after that. Saw a guy who'd just been mugged laying on the ground on an apartment complex parking lot. I had noticed a car with its lights off screeching out of the lot as I was pulling in, but didn't think anything of it until I saw the guy, called the cops and bounced. Stuck around the area and saw him getting carted into an ambulance 5 minutes later. Lots of wildlife, mostly normal stuff for my area. Deer, coyotes, raccoons, skunks, foxes, etc. I was driving slowly down a street the other day and noticed a coyote near the road, so I pulled over to look at it. It immediately looked over at me in the eyes, squatted and shat directly in front of me without breaking eye contact. It was weirdly kind of majestic because he just kinda kicked grass on his business and trotted off looking super proud. I drive a lot but mostly during the day. I have about 400,000 miles on the road just in the last 10 years. Anyway, the creepiest things I've seen have all been driving up on accidents where you know someone's died. There are plenty of people all around with their phones out but no emergency crew is there yet. Nothing you can do except keep moving and not make a spectacle of things. Some odd things I've seen have been hitchhikers on rarely traveled country roads, dogs covered in blood dragging dead wildlife around, and just wildlife in general doing crazy crap like a couple of raccoons doing the nasty in the middle of the road. Scariest moments have all been driving in crappy conditions, not being able to see the road and wondering if I was going to make it home at all. My dad is a truck driver, and he is away from home on long hauls all the time. He's an ex-alcoholic and his number one concern is that I never fall into the same horrible addiction that he had. So, when I turned 21, he made sure to always call on Friday and Saturday nights to make sure that if I was going out to a bar I had a designated driver, that I wouldn't drink too much, and all that. Just regular caring dad stuff. Recently he called me around 3 AM on a Saturday night. I was sleeping but he called like 4 or 5 times before I answered, and when I did he was a wreck. Apparently a young girl was drunk driving on the highway and had gotten a flat, pulled over to the side and was stumbling around drunk in the lane barefoot and wasted, and someone had hit her. It was pretty gruesome and my poor daddy was close enough to see it happen, and he spent ages on the phone just reiterating that I can't ever let that happen to me or anyone around me. My dad, yeah, not me, sorry, is about as straight down the line as a person can get. No nonsense, no BS. In other words, I take him at his word with confidence. In the wee hours of the morning, he recalls it was around 3 AM. He was driving his tanker through the Scottish Highlands. long slog home ahead of him. He suddenly notices that something is pacing him in the next lane. He said it was a silver craft of sorts, clearly made up to blend in and appear as a car, but it lacked any wheels and was very much hovering a good foot or so off the ground. After pacing my dad's tanker for a short while, it sped off into the distance at a heck of a pace, yet still observed lane discipline. My dad has no idea what it was. His best guess is that it's some kind of experimental military tech. Whatever it was, he said it was pretty bloody creepy. My dad was a truck driver for many years. We live in central Kansas, and while some weird crap happens here like strangers walking into town during whiteout blizzards, all kinds of UFO sightings which most attribute to secret military stuff from Fort Riley, and strange animal sightings like black cats the size of German shepherds and they have long white tufts of hair sticking up from ears like a lynx. Living here you just expect to hear about this kind of stuff. What you don't expect to hear about is something another truck driver told my dad and I one day while we were at our shop working on dad's truck. The trucker said he was near the I-70/I-135 interchange just north of Salina, KS, when he saw a completely hairless 7-foot-tall man, white as snow, wearing a silver robe with gold trim and gold symbols on the long sleeves. He was holding 3 leashes and at the end of each leash was a completely nude human child on all fours. There they were, just on the edge of the road, and the tall man holding up one thumb from an outstretched arm, but no motion or movement from the man or the 3 naked kids on leashes. When he was done telling his fantastical BS story, I was snickering at the ridiculousness of it and turned to look at my dad, but he wasn't laughing. Instead he was pale white in the face and shaking. Dad said he saw the same thing months earlier just north of Oklahoma City and attributed it to exhaustion after having driven 18 hours straight. Creeps me out just thinking about my dad's face that day. My dad's a trucker, and mostly he doesn't see much in spite of driving nights for dang near 30 years. But a few of the things he's seen: bright lights like bubbles floating around over a forest, hitchhikers that are unnaturally tall, hitchhikers soaked in blood, figures in the trees dragging dead animals, and my personal favorite, he went to sleep after buying dinner at a truck stop, only to wake up and find the truck stop completely abandoned and ruined the following morning. You have been visited by the magical duck. You don't have to do anything, he will simply give you a good day today. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.